Got it? Not long for me, I thought so.
Good morning, Ms. Ford. All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's 9 o'clock. Call the C Griffin Board of Commissioners workshop meeting to order. First item on the agenda is a presentation of the Daughters of American Revolution regarding erecting a Revolutionary War Monument at Memorial Park. Daughters of the American Revolution, Representative Judy Parker will address. Good morning.
Good morning. Just to introduce Ms. Parker, she gave a note to Christopher Walker and I to talk about possibly putting a plaque at our Memorial Park. So she's going to give you some more information about that. And I apologize in advance for my voice. I hope I make it through this meeting. I'm not as sick as I sound. I do not have COVID, flu, or strep. I got tested yesterday just to make sure. But Ms. Parker?
Thank you.
Good morning. Welcome, Ms. Judy.
Thank you, and I didn't bring it to her or catch it from her. I'm the same way, I can't stop sneezing. Good morning, commissioners and staff. My name is Judy Parker. I'm the regent of the Pulaski Chapter, Daughters of the American Revolution. The Pulaski Chapter has been in Griffin in Spalding County for 128 years. We were the 6th chapter chartered in Georgia. Our chapter has served this community well through all those years. And among the most notable and visible contributions are 2 monuments that are already at Memorial Park, and you have copies of those. We have the American Revolution and also the World War II monument that honored those who served in both wars. I'm here today on behalf of the Pulaski Daughters to ask you for written permission to place another historic marker in Memorial Park. This one is to celebrate America's 250th birthday. This is a copy of the marker, and as you'll see, I changed it to Pulaski Chapter, our name would be. Yeah. This National Patriots Marker project is established to raise public awareness of the men and women who achieved American independence. Our goal is to have at least one marker in each state prior to the celebration of America's 250th birthday. The cost is approximately $4,800. We will ask for donations from our members and our supporters, and we'll use chapter funds for any remaining balance that is needed. We're open to unveiling the monument in cooperation with other activities that the city has planned or as a kickoff to America's 250th birthday in our community. Thank you for your time, and I ask you for your consideration for us to place this marker.
Wonderful. I remember my granddad was involved in the 200 celebration back in 1976, and it was a big, exciting time
It
for our
was.
community in America. So I think this
I hope you'll
is worthy. Does staff have any concerns or questions or recommendations?
No, sir. Mr. Walker and I think that this is just in keeping with Memorial Park and what's out there already, and it does follow the naming policy that we already have in effect, so I think it's fine.
Does the board have any comments or questions? Oh, very nice. Do we need to have a vote, or is it something just kind of a consensus?
I think that you are fine with just a consensus. It doesn't seem to require a vote in your process. It just says it needs to be discussed at a public meeting.
Any objections to none whatsoever? Thank you so much for your service. And
Thank
you for
you.
coming up bright and early this morning.
Thank you. I do have to have something written to submit, so could I just get a letter?
We can do that if y'all are okay with that. I can draft something and have it signed.
I just have all these forms.
Yes, ma'am. Perfect.
Thank you for your time.
I'll give it to Ms. Parker on that.
Moving to item 2, discuss the different scenarios for reapportionment of districts and conduct a public hearing around the city of Griffin's redistricting process. City Manager Jessica O'Connor and City Attorney Drew Whalen will address. Good morning, Mr. Whalen.
Good morning. We're moving on with redistricting.
made some real headway, I think, last week. We're joined this morning, it should be joined this morning by Ben Griffin, Kate Dorian, and John McKenzie. Amanda, are they with us?
John is not, but Kate and Ben are.
Okay.
Yep,
Kate
I'm
is
here,
with us.
not John.
All right, so Kate may jump in here. She's the one who actually put these maps together. The first map, and let me state that they are in your agenda packet in digital format. They're also on the city's website, and the districting portal. And then we had Brian Haynes, our GIS guru, blow them up. So they're the ones that are on the front of the dais up here if you want to come down and look at them. We're not going to make any recommendations to you today. We're going to talk basically about some of the factors that went into them. Of course, at your last meeting on October 28th, you adopted a resolution setting the criteria for the drawing of maps. And those criteria have been followed by Flow Analytics. The first map that you have is your current district lines analyzed under the 2020 census data. And of course, it shows you that the deviation have gotten all out of kilter, about 15% deviation. So it's greater than the allowable 10%. The second map, which is labeled Scenario 1, appears to be the plan that meets all redistricting criteria and adjusts the boundaries of the current districts, the closest to the existing plan. That is one of the factors that we were to consider. The deviation is 4.1%, which is very good. All incumbent commissioners will continue to reside within their respective districts under this plan. And by incumbent commissioners, I'm referring to the 7 of you. Now, there's an election coming up next week. That could have some possibility to change things, but if it does, we'll deal with it. And if you use the rule of thumb that a safe majority-minority seat is 65% or greater, districts 1, 2, and 6 would all meet this criteria. Probably getting a little close on that, having some very high majority-minority percentages, up close to 90%, and I think in 1 and 2. You might want to think about the diversity of spreading that out more. Scenario number 2 plan offers the best overall range of deviation in population and is probably the most compact of the 4 proposed plans. However, incumbent commissioners in districts 3, 4, and 5 would be removed from their districts. I think in District 5, I think you wound up with Truman, you and Roger both, I think, on that plan in the same district. And that's because the Country Club is sort of an outlier, as you know, west of the city. Percentage of Hispanic and Latino population in District 5 is starting to emerge. And I think that's something that you would want to take into effect in your District 5. Scenario number 3 offers a very good overall range of deviation in population, but like scenario 2, it removes the incumbent commissioner from District 5 out of his district. Note that the percentage of Hispanic Latino population in District 5 under this plan also is starting to grow and emerge in that particular district. And that was scenario 1, trying to jump off the wall. All right, scenario number 4 is very close statistically to scenario 1. It leaves all incumbent commissioners remaining in their respective districts, and it's a very good overall deviation, very acceptable deviation range. This plan reflects the changing diversity of the community, particularly in districts 4, 5, and 6. And I would point out that District 6 does fall below the 65%, let's say, majority-minority district. Now, unless Kate wants to add something to that. Kate, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Anything you want to add to that?
No, that was a good summary. I think I would just kind of high level, these are all kind of starting points, different ideas for where you could start from for, comment. and we don't have to move forward with all 4 of these. We could pick 1 or 2 to kind of move forward with. So I just kind of wanted to note that these are definitely a jumping off point for making further changes to these as well.
Okay, and I want to reemphasize, we announced this at our prior public meeting in October, but we do have on our website, city website, www.cityofgriffin.com, a redistricting portal with a comment form. Somebody can go to and fill in the comment. That preserves a record of that comment and comes back to us. Unfortunately, nobody's been using that site thus far. It's been up there a month. And we haven't had comments yet, but I would like to encourage and urge the public to become involved in this process and to use that comment form after they look at these various maps. As I say, they're all available to look at on the website itself. We will meet again on this subject. The plan is to meet on December the 10th, which is your only meeting in December. And at that time, we would have a selection made by you as to which plan you want to go with. Then in January, we'll adopt by way of a home rule ordinance that particular plan or some deviation of that plan. So give this some attention over the next few weeks. Come by and look at the maps. You can see them blown up down here. Mr. Mayor, I'd ask at this time you open the floor for public comment. If anybody's here today and wants to say anything about the process.
That's fine. If I can just reflect on what I've seen, scenario 2 and 3 both moved Mr. Tinsley out of this district from my interpretation, which I think that's potentially could be a no-go. Also, District 6, we had the situation in 2001 redistricting lawsuit where Mr. McCord, or District 6 at the time, dropped below 65%. We ended up having a challenge against the election of 2001. And so both option 2, 3, and 4 dropped dropped the racial makeup below 65%. But that's something we need to, whatever plan, that's still an issue for our concern, that we maintain at least a 65%.
Okay, and that comment needs to be noted as a minute.
So that needs to be a concern. Whatever plan we have, we need to make sure that we don't fall below that 65% in what at the time the 3 minority districts. And then removing a commissioner out of 2 commissioners in 1 district. To me, I've got a little issue with that we need to make sure we adjust. So overall, for me, scenario 1 looks like it meets the level of most of all 4 options, and I guess we can still tweak it one way or the other to.
And let me add, we found when we got into this last week, very minor conflicts between the Census Bureau map of the city and our own boundary map of the city. Part of that is caused by renumbering or reorganization by census of various blocks and tracts. And we're making some adjustment, having to make some adjustment for that. I think we've got 2 or 3 areas that we're trying to go back now, and Brian's going to be working with Kate trying to work out those areas to find out why they don't jive. But very, very minor. So what you see today is basically, I think, a good map.
And just to clarify that point, that there's 2 from the annexations, which you can sort of see in the maps. The one that we just did on Dewey Street, which doesn't have any populations, that won't change any statistics. The other one being out on 362, which eventually will have populations, that would change some statistics. And for some reason, this ward, it affects you and Mr. Tinsley, the 17th and 18th streets on Lane, and I don't remember what borders the other side. For some reason, it's showing differently on census than it is in our current city limits, so we can correct all of that. That does include a couple of houses that will change some statistics, but not much.
Do we have this on a slide or something? Website.
It's in your packet.
It was in your agenda packet that was sent to you electronically.
Are you lost?
Susan then sent it to me.
Those particularly are not in your agenda packet because these have the commission, your current residences on them.
Oh,
And the ones in your agenda packet and on the website do not.
thank you.
Um,
None of these are the district as they are now.
That's the one we just folded up.
The one that was closest to you there a minute ago.
Okay,
Very
I have a few questions. So my first question is, I guess it's just about the numbers. I'm looking at page 11, just so that I can actually ask actual questions. So I see that you've got the total population, so that is the information that comes directly from the census.
That's correct.
So what was?
Well, both total population and voting age population, both come from the census.
Right,
But we're required to use total population.
okay. So what was that? Do we know remember what our reporting, like how we estimated how much of the county actually participated in the census?
Not 80 something, I don't remember. Those final numbers. Let me see if I can.
Something-ish, okay, and then can somebody explain to me what it is that Doug was mentioning about the 65% threshold as it pertains to the race and ethnicity per district? Is that a threshold or?
Traditionally, from the case law and looking at how districts are drawn, the courts have used a 65% as the standard for, say, majority minority district.
Okay,
So if you look, for example, at scenario 1, you'll see that districts 1, 2, and 6 all meet that 65% standard.
correct. Okay, so, and then the other question that I had, just because it came up in the dialogue, was about what is the significance of compactness? I mean, obviously, I see the image of it, but what does that mean in terms of?
Well, I don't know in our case if it's that compelling a factor. Kate may want to weigh in on this, but you've got, particularly in some of your congressional and state redistricting cases, they talk about gerrymandering where you had these districts that look like a snake going down a long road to pick up a group of people because of their proper complexion.
Mhm.
And, that's where this compaction
Okay,
standard comes from, but really of the 4 plans, I think number 2 and number 4, I believe are the 2 that both offered very good compaction. Maybe number 4 even a little bit better than number 2. I think what I thought was interesting was looking at the diversity you find in districts 4, 5, and 6 in scenario 4. Getting away from 6 being a 65% minority district, but it's only, I think, dropped down to 59%. They're very close.
It's District 6, now we dropped down to 59
in scenario 4.
in scenario 4. Okay.
Yeah, and that would be something, I can just chime in, that would be something that's pretty easy to, look at the blocks around scenario 4, District 6, and, look at we have the demographic information for those and get scenario or District 6 back up above 65%, is something that we could make an adjustment to scenario 4. And that probably wouldn't be too difficult to do.
Probably stay within deviation doing that too.
Yes. Yep.
I guess obviously you can't account for it now that we have the census information, but I just wonder how significantly the minority population is underrepresented in the census and how that actually affects how these bounds get drawn. I mean, obviously the data is the key, and there's no challenging that. But I'm wondering from a historical standpoint of participation, how that actually affects the makeup of these districts as opposed to putting it on the census.
The only final number that we have is the self-response rate, which is only 59.4%. So that does not include the census actual employees coming out from houses and taking information. So I don't know, but if I remember, it was somewhere in the 80-something percentile. So yeah, you're talking about over 10% of your population that you're not accounting for.
Yeah,
That's an estimate.
right. And I mean, historically, there's been issues in the minority community, even if Drew mentioned the Hispanic and Latino community, surely there's an underrepresentation in that community. So I don't necessarily know that I have a question about that at this particular point. I think I would need more information, but I think it is a concern that I have, that while I respect that we have to go by the presented data from the census, I still harbor a concern about the nature of the census being under participated in by minorities.
Kate, you and Ben have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, let me chime in just briefly. Good morning to all of you. It's good to see you virtually. The problem of the undercount is one that is a nationwide issue. It has been challenged in court. There are a number of pending federal cases that are bringing this issue up. There's nothing going on right now that directly affects the redistricting process in Griffin, Georgia. The big concern is the undercount going to be as big or greater than it was in prior years? And no one knows. You can get an opinion on both sides of the issue. What I've always done, I go back to the election returns, the electoral analysis for your own municipality, and you look and see particularly for those municipal districts, those aldermanic districts that are very high in minority population, up above 65, 70%, and see if there has been a consistent pattern of election and re-election of a minority to those positions. And it's not a lead pipe cinch. You don't look for proportionality. You're not looking for proportional representation, which the Voting Rights Act specifically precludes, but you're looking for fairness. And that's where I've looked back, and Drew has as well. And Drew has, as your city attorney, has actually experienced this over the last number of election cycles, that there does not appear to be any significant racial polarization. That to me is the one indicator that you would have a problem if there was a severe undercount of your minorities and you had a consistent rejection of minority candidates at the polls. That doesn't appear to be the case. Let me add one other thing on compactness. This is a term that we pick up from the Voting Rights Act, a section of it called Section 2. It still applies. And basically, compactness is, think of it as the antidote, the cure for racial or partisan gerrymandering. If you have a compact district, you're as realistically and physically as possible, you're keeping the district intact, coherent, not looking bizarre, misshapen, but in a fairly significant way. It reflects the community and the neighborhoods that make it up. So that's all I would say there. And I don't think you've got a major problem at all with the census undercount having a direct impact on this process. Flow Analytics has done an excellent job in marshaling the data. Kate has been very responsive at each step and trying to get as many alternatives in front of you as possible. I'm really impressed that you've got a number of good possibilities to consider. This is where it comes down to the elected officials making the final decision. You're not ready, I don't think, Drew. This is not the date for that, but you're pretty close to that. You're in a good position for that.
Sure.
Okay, I know you said it in District 6, that right, as on one of these maps, or that he was like down to 59%.
Right.
Would be
That's
scenario
under,
4.
I think, scenario 4.
4. Okay, on any of these maps, I heard you say that basically in District 1 and District 2, that we're running at 90% minority. Okay, does any of these maps change that where we would not be not at 90%?
Yes, scenario 3.
Okay, on scenario 3, what would we be?
Well, scenario 3 drops it, District 1 still like mid-80s, and it drops District 2 to low 70s.
Well, you gotta take into account all the minorities, so you gotta add the other.
But yeah, I run across it.
There's 2 or more, so actually District 1 stays at about 91 or 90 point something.
What page? Okay, because that's
the
the
2 or more Hispanic and then some other race. And then
okay. So
one
then,
to-
right, so that puts 1 at 90, but then 2 I
Yeah, 2
miscalculated. It's low 70s,
2 would be at
right?
what?
Yeah, 78.
Okay.
Right. So I'm trying to say.
Cynthia, you got the breakdown in your packet.
Okay, let me go to that, let me have the different scenarios that they're talking about. I think you guys want to put up one of their.
So like scenario 1, you've got, you know, drop we dropped District 1 to 79.8 and District 2 to 71.3. Is there a,
For black, not
for,
for.
for black, and then District 6 would be 67.5% based on scenario 1. Is there any of the the white voters that could be pulled out of those to potentially enhance District 4 and 5? Or is it just, it's a shotgun effect where you got so many votes?
I don't understand the question.
We've still got very segregated housing patterns, which makes it difficult.
What do you mean, segregated housing pattern?
Well, you still got basically north of the tracks, you got most of you minorities. All
And
the-
that's where my concern comes in.
Right.
What I'm asking you about, how do you shift some of that out of District 1 and District 2 into some other district?
I think it could be done. Kate, would you like to play with that somewhat?
Yeah, I can definitely work with those boundaries. I think what we kind of keep an eye on is not extending the district boundary kind of out and away from the central, kind of core of the district, because then that's where you get into these like longer, like more of a reaching out kind of a thing if you're trying to pull like certain areas into a district, but it starts to look, like Ben was saying, it starts to look kind of, like not like a compact district. But we can definitely work on, the kind of, do we take District 1 and go more to the eastern side of it and see if that kind of changes things, or do we shift it more to, District 1 takes over part of that northern part of District 5, so we can kind of shift them back and forth, but what we don't want to do is just kind of keep extending it out. So that's also what we're looking at.
As y'all have thoughts on this as you go forward, please let us know.
I will.
That way we can sit there and work with the computer and show you the results.
We're happy to make additional scenarios based on, we can take scenario 4 and make those adjustments to District 6 so that we bring that back up to over 65%. And that would be scenario 5, and so then we can take some of these and make adjustments to them and then have, new versions of them to look at.
And we're gonna put all of these in the conference room, spread out. We might just hold them every once in a while for meetings, but they'll be up there for y'all to review whenever you'd like to come back.
What about any potential annexation? Like down there at 5 and 6, that area between 6 and 4. We were talking about annexation in the past. And it says included in that now. Because it doesn't exist.
Everything that's been annexed into the city is now included, yes.
I know, but I'm saying future.
Future annexation, you just have to take them when they come.
The big white one in between 6 and 4, that's county, buildings. So there's no voters out there.
More about that area there at 5.
So all that in the middle of your two.
It's there on the map.
I think a lot of that is Southern Crescent, maybe.
UGA. Oh, that's
Is that what it is?
that's
UGA.
Georgia. We try to get them to come in at one time.
That's right. So you are missing some residences there, but
So
Right, you want
the area of UGA, where is it not in any district? That's not in any district.
Well, the main campus is, but the area going to Ellis Road and the section that sits between, runs along Shoal Creek. Just below the number 5 there on the map, there's a little pocket.
That's my confusion.
Keep in mind, under the Georgia law, you could annex across that property, that state property.
That's what we did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have done that some in the past.
And the area that's up on, up on McIntosh and Old Atlanta Road cannot connect with the rest of District 1 at all. But, and at one point, they had Melrose, we had separated that and that had gone into District, what's your 5? 5. And I just found out the other day that it was in District 1.
Well, and don't forget, one of your goals this year, it's gotten a little bit sidetracked, was to sort of clean up these boundary lines through annexation, because it is difficult. It's real difficult when Brad's trying to draw lines and figure out new districts when we've got, a city and county line going down the middle of the road. So, that was one of your goals, and we've sort of, had a little bit more stuff that's just been related to the city and then to annexation. So that's something that we can still work on.
Well, that's true of North Pine Hill.
Yes.
Yeah.
South Pineville too.
Yeah, I mean, cause I'm over there, there's like 4 or 5 houses on North Pine Hill, and I'm over there handing out, election information, and they're like, well, we're in the county.
We're the county.
I'm like, oh, excuse me,
I mean,
there's like
it's,
4 or 5 houses there that is on the,
this time of
It's east
year, every time you find, Brian's already found a couple parcels that still have county parcels, ID numbers that are really city parcels. And so there's always something that has to be corrected.
so that brings up another question, which doesn't relate to this, but that area east of North Pine Hill, those 4 or 5 houses, is that patrolled by the city or the county?
It's a county.
That's county, I think.
So Griffin PD, then they write citations for people that may be exceeding the speed limit on that side of the road.
I want to say that we entered into a contract with the county years ago to do traffic enforcement on all of Pine Hill Road.
Okay, good, because I've heard complaints about that.
Yeah.
Don't know, but look into it.
You want to call it public comment, see if there's any?
Anything else from the city commission? We'd like to open this as a public hearing for public comment. Does anybody in the audience like to come before the board? Yes, ma'am. Please come forward, state your name and address for the record. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Gwen Flowers Taylor. I live at 134 Spalding Street in Griffin. I think part of the confusion for this in this and me is that in some parts of the city where the county has property, they are literally counted in the county. I mean, that's the city, regardless of whether there's a population there. So when you put the confusing part on the map that shows that the white area is the county area, it's rather confusing because whether they're citizens or not, they're still within the city limits. My concern is that, and maybe I got here late, I don't know what kind of deviations this map presents, if everybody's under 10% in terms of changes. But it just seems that some, like, I think District 6, whose district is that? Is that Commissioner McCord?
Which scenario, Gwen, are you referring
That's
to?
scenario 1 right there on the
There's
board.
4 of them.
Okay, so I don't have the full agenda. So I'm not sure what the other scenarios are, but I'm just simply saying in terms of it, when you look at that, at Commissioner McCord's district, does he just have a much more densely populated area than everybody else? And that's why his land mass is that way. And if that were the case, then what happens with District 3? It just seems that as far as District 1 is concerned, District 1 goes from one extreme end in the east all the way across the center of the city to the other end. And that is confusing for voters, especially when you have areas that make a dip, like in Commissioner McCord's district, where it dips to the south side. And then his area is all surrounded by those other areas. I have to wonder if there's population in there that was missed, or whether or not that, and of course, this is the only scenario map that I've seen. So, my concern is that as a member of District 1, a citizen in District 1, it's hard for me to understand why that map goes all the way across the city. It transcends the city.
District 2. Your district.
District 2, okay. Well, yeah, District 2. So the same issue I have with that. Looking at how voters will figure out where they vote and why some people live across the street from somebody else, but they're voting in 2 different places. That would be my concern.
Thank you very much. Again, this is public comment. Is there anybody else in the audience like to come before the board for comment or discussion or questions?
Mayor, just to clarify, the jail and the public works building and the sheriff's office and all of that on Justice Boulevard is in the county. It has not been annexed into the city. So
Correct.
there is that discrepancy right there, but it does touch county lines on 362, so it doesn't violate the law, but that's not within the city limits. So it's not supposed to be a color.
Which gap is that?
That big one in between 5 and 6.
Kind of
I
shaped
mean,
like
in
a
between
backwards
6 and
loop?
4.
6
Sorry.
and 4, so, yeah, the big
Yeah,
shape,
so this gets sort of.
the backwards Louisiana.
Yes,
Yeah, that's
Okay.
actual county.
that's county, and then the little square one that's to the southeast.
That's what, a lot of dead people live in that.
Okay,
That's the funeral home, so they
And then
can vote out here, so.
and then the one to the northwest of that is what, where it's not completely an island, but it may as well
On
be.
number 3,
I don't know which scenario I'm looking at, it's just even on that map.
on the bottom piece, that's a section of wooded land that's off.
No, to the northwest of the backwards loop. On that
Oh.
map, it's in 5.
That's, the UGA campus, they're off of between Georgia 16. No, I'm sorry. That is-
Brian, do you know off the top of your head?
The Carver, Jersey.
The one
It's
on
UGA
Ellis,
land.
it's all, I think it's called the Mill Village up there. Next to
talking about
UGA.
this?
Griffin.
This one.
That's over there off of, up between Carver and Pine Hill Road, I think there's a hole.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously on this map, it's not an island because there is some separation between the lines. I'm just kind of wondering, just for perspective, what that is.
Could that be the fire department?
Which one are we talking about?
Is that?
Okay.
The one, the farthest west.
It's in blue, yes, that one, I want to know what that is.
That might be the fire department and dog park.
No, that's the boot, that's the backwards boot. That's that track.
Jail.
Yeah, this is all the jail. That's the jail, the sheriff's department, and the public works building and all of that. Next door, this used to be bigger. We annexed, Mr. Landrum's property next to it.
Okay,
And then that only left county stuff there. That is.
that fire?
Piedmont Road.
All right.
Piedmont.
Does this map currently reflect the annexation we did on the Harvey Buffington
Yes.
Rodney district?
Mhm. That's that last little thing going out on Rodney. So,
okay, so on the map that's on the screen, because there's too many maps that's going around, there is an L shaped in District 3. What is that? That one, that you just put the cursor on?
That's off Grant,
that's
that's off
back,
Maple Drive.
yeah, that backside of Grantland.
It's kind of wooded, it's a unpopulated, just a vacant land.
Okay, and then in District 4, in the yellow section, that little square is what?
That's the funeral home and,
Yeah, that's what's in the photo.
based in
Out by the
Colorado,
corporate.
that's where people, dead people live.
Okay, then in the orange in District 6, the backwards loop, that's the
County.
Public Works County.
In the fire department.
Okay, and then in District 5, what is that one?
What part?
It's off behind the road.
Oh, that blue one?
But what
That's
is
the
it?
Piedmont
It's
Road.
just an unannexed section.
That one is the street with houses on it.
Poplar, I think the north is bordered by Poplar Street there.
Yes.
Is there any way to zone
It says
No,
Pine
no.
Hill and kind of.
Yeah,
Oh, I
South
thought
Pine Hill
that was
Road.
down.
Where it's just north of Carriage Hills, that area.
Yeah, it's off of, when you were, let's say you're coming out, Poplar from, you pass Griffin on your right, you would take a left on, let's see,
Yeah, that is.
yeah, on, Pine Hill. And that's really Nixon Street. It changes to Nixon.
Oh,
Piedmont's on the
Nixon's on
right
the
side, and that's
Nixon is
county
on-
too.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things over there, Piedmont and Nixon
Mixon is to the west.
to the
Yeah.
west, to Piedmont to the east.
But does that have, but is that populated with homes?
Residences.
Yes.
Okay, and that's what I was thinking. So the other areas we're saying are not, but
How
that.
did that stay out? Why is that not in the city?
There's a little finger, like a little,
Cause that's right above Carriage Hills.
Yeah, that's kind of weird.
That's one of those areas we're talking about where like on South Pine Hill, I have one side of the street and there's no representation of the city on the other side.
Same with me.
Yeah,
Okay, well, now that I confused everybody, let's go to the next thing.
And also there's a little hole there in 5. You look just to
Yep,
the west of the letter 5, there's a little hole. What is that? Just
It's
to
a
the,
very
to the
question.
5? Yeah.
I don't know. Ryan, do you know? It's
Ain't
right
that
above
little piece
that.
out there?
That's almost like one lot.
What about the little one up above it?
It looks like that's about 4 or 5 lots on Pine Hill Road.
That is.
Oh, that's that area I was talking about.
That is, that's the Southern Pipe and Supply, I think. I don't know what that is.
Right there. That's
Well, Pine Hill Road is south of Noonan Road, so it's somewhere
Yeah.
between Poplar Street and Georgia 16.
There's,
So
that's
there's a
all
little,
like.
little island there next to Griffin High School or
That
something.
might be the ball field over there. So.
Oh, there's, it's Chief Jones' parents' house
Okay.
and a couple other residences right there. Wow. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. That's what's right beside the ball field at Griffin High. There's 5. Yep, 5 of them in the county. That's it. Those kind of things that need to be cleaned up.
I have one.
Well, and Honeybee Creek's a whole nother debacle.
Where are the Ashton areas?
I'm sorry?
The Ashton areas? Where you got hash
That was
marks?
the old
What are those
district.
represent?
That's the change.
That's, yeah, change
Oh,
of
yeah.
district. So that's,
That's a change from current.
that would have been like in the blue hashes, it was in District 4, and it shifts into District 2.
Okay, I don't have any more questions right now, but I will when I come to this conference room and look at the map.
Yes, that'll be fine whenever you want to come. If you want to make an appointment with Brian and or Drew, or you just want to come by, that's fine too.
I'll look by myself first and then I'll make an
That'll
appointment.
be fine.
Again, this is a public hearing. Is there anybody else in the audience like to come before the board? Last call. Anything else from the board? Commissioners? No. Everybody good? Thank you, Drew and the team, for y'all's service, and look forward to discussing this again, I believe, on December 10th, is correct?
That's correct.
All right.
No,
14?
Meeting.
14th, okay, December 14th.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Moving into item 3, let's discuss options for potential new parade route. All right, Chief Yates will address. Welcome back, sir. Yes, the Captain Jones with us. Welcome.
Yeah, I brought some backup in case I need it. So, when we were here last time, we presented an option or 2 for parade routes. I think Ms. Ward requested we take another look at it. And we basically took that Solomon Street parade route that we had originally traveling from east to west and did a mirror image of it, now going west to traveling east. We talked with some of the property owners at the beginning area. They said they didn't have any problem with us using some of their area to stage up. Captain Jones also talked with DOT about the intermittent closure of 155 with the parade route crossing it. They didn't have a problem with that. So we have those 2 options on the table. Both are essentially Solomon Street routes. The one, what we'll call number 1 goes east to west, number 2 goes west to east, and the third option would be to do nothing, leave it on North Expressway. So the important thing of it is I need some guidance and a decision from you guys, because if I don't get it going, we won't have enough time to do 2 readings and change it by the time a Christmas parade or something arises. So I gotta get y'all to point me in the right direction today.
Have we heard back from Dennis Scott and
We
the
have,
organization in regards to, are they still
We have-
wanting to do it that Saturday before Christmas, or?
I'm not sure about the date. We have talked to them a little bit, but it was mostly about the design of the route. Both of these options include a good bit of what Dennis Scott was proposing, but it's a little bit shorter, and it doesn't traverse up Hill Street over to Broad and then back south.
I'm not so much worried about his route, I'm more concerned about, basically, are we still pushing this for them?
I don't think that's a great idea, but I'll have to, we're at the mercy of the organizations applying for their permit. So what date they decide to do it, we don't control that for the most part. What we have to do today is get the route decided and go from there. Yes, sir.
Is there a option that this part prefers, one, two?
We prefer North Expressway.
No, I'm saying other than that.
No, they're about the same. It's 6 and 1, half a dozen of
Whether
another.
you're going Solomon eastbound or either westbound.
It doesn't make any difference. Something to realize is all of them have issues, and somebody's not gonna be happy with with whatever we do. So we just have to pick the lesser of the evils and give it a shot.
Well, I think he does need his backup. There is a third option, because it sounded like last time that we weren't pleased with the length of the parade. So Captain Jones did add a third option that makes it over half a mile, which includes Broad Street. So
That's the Dennis Scott route.
Yeah, that's it, where it goes around the block.
We were afraid that it might double back on itself, plus people that are walking. It's a long route, but it's on the table if y'all want to consider that one.
Then on the east-west, we're starting at Fifth Street,
Yes,
Fifth Street to 12th Street,
green space down there.
right, but Fifth to 12th, is that, and the other way is
I
12th?
think it was tonight.
Tonight,
Nice, okay.
we're trying to go from city lot to city lot. What we're trying
And
to
then
do.
the other direction is basically reverse or
It's a
10th
mirror
Street.
image of it.
Hmm.
It's just a mirror image of it.
And then we run into the railroad track down there too, right there in Dove Down, so we can't go.
I've never seen a train on it, but it's could happen.
So we would use, so if we used 9th Street, we could use the city parking lot.
Yeah, we've got some city space on both ends to use. That's one of the reasons we kind of wanted to go use that model.
What's your thought, Ms. Ward? We're not doing Broad Street.
Okay, so,
This is,
It only takes a small portion of Broad Street, but it is an option. Just remember with that one, it's significantly longer and there are more turns to make.
You say significant, what is significant? How many more places?
Linearly, I'm not sure, but it's making a whole 2 or 3 blocks. It's,
To go around the square? Yeah, like a lasso.
I'm a little concerned about if it's long enough where it turns north on Hill Street and comes back around, it could catch the tail end of itself.
Well, is that the intention for it to, I can't see it, but to not go down and then you said turn on Hill and then come back around?
Yeah, their intention was to begin and end at the same place.
Okay, well, y'all know I don't really have anything because I don't like any of the options. So
We don't either.
it's kind of on, I wanted to stay on North Expressway just because it seemed easier to me, but I would defer to the pleasure of the board because I don't particularly like Kimberly.
And that is one of the problems with option 3, where you go around the block is, the tail could get, where you're.
We could have a traffic jam there.
Because in theory, we were just using one direction of traffic, so when it came back around, they would, like if we were out, disoriented, we would walk up the street on the side of the county buildings, and then when they came back, they would be expected to come back down that side of the street, as opposed to this side with the city.
It's roughly twice, maybe a little more than twice as long.
You could stop at Hill Street when you come back down Broad, you just stop at Hill Street and then let them just shoot on down Broad to tie back into where they parked there, instead of coming uphill.
Well, you got the parking lots there. So. If you stop,
There's not a perfect solution by any means.
And during the homecoming parade, you're going to basically clear out all the vehicles from
That's the problem with
Hill
downtown.
Street.
That's the
or
problem with it.
Solomon Street is, that is the logistics of.
I don't know about the days on that, if we could curb it to like on a Saturday or on.
All of them are on the weekends, I believe, weekends or holidays, except homecoming.
Now, with that on Solomon, since there's an island going the entire length, you can block off both sides.
Yes.
You have to, right?
But if we try to do the North Hill, West Broad route, remember it's gonna take twice as long. And we'll have to block it off for a significantly longer period of time.
What if we took that option 3 and took out Hill Street?
If we take that out, we almost back to what we're doing, except they don't have a way to turn around.
Then you get the parking lots there, walking center, and
How do you get there and take out Hill Street?
I'm talking about if you took out this Hill Street. Come back down Broad and just end right there at Hill.
Or you can go all the way, you can make a complete loop. You can do that.
Y'all gonna have to keep walking 8 miles on the parade.
No, but I mean, if you started, there starts out at Fifth Street, you go west.
Typically, what we've had with somewhat general lack of participation is maybe a few people walking that can't keep up with the floats in the parade. And then what happens is you have this, as the longer it goes, the more it gets separated because of one portion of it traveling faster than the other. I just needed to tell me which of the evils.
Put it on Mr. McCord. What's your thought, Mr. McCord?
I'm not like Cora. I despise the route on the north and south.
No, I don't despise them.
But I don't like the current route because there is a lack of participation. And I think we gotta do things that's going to be more inclusive for our community, to most of us who never been to a parade. To some people, this is their form of entertainment.
Celebration.
And is part of that, what do we call it? Something life. Quality of life for some of our residents that is something free, is city sponsored most of the time. They get a chance to get out and to get to display what it is that we're doing in our city. So I kind of like bringing everybody downtown like we do for June Jam and everything else that we want to do to showcase downtown, whichever scenario is going to, I guess, showcase more of our downtown. I'm for it. I'm thankful that Ms. Ward.
Any of those 3 options on the table would involve the downtown area fairly significantly. It's just, remember, we've got to deal with the parking and things like that.
I like Route 3.
Is there a way to make Route 3 where you
Got all that parking right there on,
We can do Route 3 and try it. And
I
see
mean, if
if
you Route 3 and you start off at 9th Street and go east toward, and down to Fifth Street, take a left on Fifth Street, and then come back Broad Street and then back up 9th Street. Is that something like a big circle instead of a?
It's a big square.
I mean,
You got a
big rectangle.
That's a long route.
Well, I mean, but it's no different than if you're going up and around and back down Solomon Street on both sides.
Start at 9th Street where?
Start at 9th Street at the package store and the post office.
And go where?
You go east up to Fifth Street to the city hall.
There's no way you could go maybe back another block and try to make it a little bit longer and just go one way and start one area and stop basically down at, Fifth. Just stop it then.
But they don't wanna cross the railroad tracks. That's why they're using 9th Street. The
And they got the
railroad tracks
city,
by Dilla down.
Okay, so
and you have the city
we're
parking
on
lot.
9th Street, we're not on Solomon Street.
No, you start at 9th, going on Solomon Street.
Yeah, but that's why they're using 9th Street as either the stop or the start, so that they don't get caught up in the railroad track, just in case there's ever a train, which it won't show up until there's a parade.
This place starts on 8th Street, or there's a turn on it, starts down at Fifth Street, goes to 8th Street, turns at the post office in front of the old 8th Street Baptist. Goes down Broad Street and then turns back south on Fifth Street.
Let me make one suggestion here to make it operationally functional for us. I don't think we can effectively do a parade route change on the fly. And what I request is that we pick one of the three, either that or let's go back to the drawing board with North Expressway and let us try to work it out, because if we don't pick one of these three, we're gonna not have enough time to do any of them. So we can always modify whichever ones we pick after we see whether it works or not. But I can't, we will not be able to get you a workable product as we try to change it on the fly today.
Okay, so option 1 and 2, or route 1 and 2. It's either eastbound or westbound on Solomon, and that's it.
9th to 5th Street.
Yeah. And 3, or 5th, it's a square and back.
I prefer something that does at least try to come back to where it started.
Either does or does not.
Does, and just be.
That would be option 3.
Can you make it a square though, or a rectangle instead of a?
I like option 3, starting, I can see.
Here's the thing.
Maybe we started on Fifth Street, that's at the old Griffin building. Come in this way, which would be considered going west. Go all the way west down to the old courthouse or 8th Street, is that right?
Mhm.
That's right.
Make a right,
To the post office, 8th Street.
okay. Make another right at the,
At Broad.
on Broad. And go all the way out
Broad Street.
Broad Street, which
Fifth
is,
Street.
yeah, which you could use your staging area to be that parking lot on Broad.
Yeah, come on over here.
And people could line up.
We can do it. I guess if
I
people
think
get
that
tired,
makes, I think that makes the most sense. You got a
People
lot of,
could be on the bridge looking, and people could.
yeah, you can have a whole setup right there.
So you
Makes
can,
sense.
Fill that bridge up to.
but
I
you
wanna make the loop.
make a circle, and you can either you can use the city county parking lot as a staging area and go, you can start it there and wrap around. Is that what you're talking about, Mr.
Yeah,
McCoy?
you start over here at the city county parking lot.
Mhm.
That's your staging area, that area.
6, they not fit. That's another block up.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah, we're talking about the rectangle.
The rectangle.
Make a rectangle.
So
We
when
just
it's
want to move it up to 6th Street, not stay at 5th.
No, you go down to Fifth
the
Street.
same
Okay,
place.
that's green space, it's not a city county parking lot, the parking lot's at.
No,
6th
we're
Street.
talking about using county city parking lot and taking it right on Broad Street,
Mhm.
going east, and then going south on Fifth, and then back around Solomon Street.
I think I hear you. Y'all want me to make this
Chief,
square?
What Mayor Holberg said was completely different than what was said the first time.
It's the same, it's the
From
same.
5th to 8th, which is not the city county parking lot.
No, but we can start,
We're saying that is the staging.
Okay,
You still can start. They can walk down, drive down, and start at Fifth.
So the reason why I use Fifth Street, have the green space there, you can get vehicles off the road. We also can block that street down pretty easily,
right,
because there's not a lot of businesses.
yes, I agree.
So we want to use that, right?
I think we want to use that, not the city county parking lot, because you still have Tuesdays and Thursdays that you allow currently, unless you want to change that within your ordinance to have a parade. That parking lot's used by
Court.
court and
Okay.
everything else, especially on Tuesdays
So
and
you wanna
Thursdays.
use the.
Fifth Street is where you need to start, and that's where you need to end.
It's like a court.
so just to throw it out there, is there a way to have a weekend route
Of course.
where you do a square, and if it's a weekday route, like a homecoming parade, where it's just a one?
Smart thing to do is,
I think you can do what you're suggesting on a weekday or a weekend. Just 5th to 8th,
Just use the
down
what you
to
call it.
Broad and back to the park.
Yeah, I like it, there you go.
You can do that Tuesday,
Problem
Thursday, but you need to start at
Just-
5th, not at 6th, not at the city county parking.
Okay, yeah, let me.
The other thing I would recommend is I think instead of changing the ordinance, maybe the way to handle this is to do a resolution, to do a one-time tryout.
I like it.
We can put that on the agenda for the 9th. If it doesn't work, then we'll know after the Christmas parade. We haven't redone an entire ordinance and we can try something else.
we like to try it these things out as we go, because there's a lot of intersections to control on these that requires more manpower and stuff like that. And the old parade route on Taylor Street, it took years to develop that to where it was functional. North Expressway still took several tries for us to get it functional. It's gonna take several tries to get this one because there's timing and intersections and parking and all these different complexities to deal with. So no matter what we do, it's gonna be a work in progress and somebody ain't gonna like it. So
that one time.
And that'll give us 9th Street as an exit for people to get in and around town. It'll give us 6th Street bridge to get people in and around.
I was very concerned about people walking and the length of the route, but I suppose if you get tired of walking, there's plenty of places to bail out.
There's a lot of benches taken out.
Okay, we can prepare a resolution to
You
that
okay with that,
effect and
Ms.
put it on
Ward?
for the 9th. And if it doesn't work,
Are you
we'll.
good with that, Ms. Ward?
Go back to the drawing board.
Are you good? Try
What
it.
else?
Okay, now that that's crystal clear, I think we've got an idea of what.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, can I confirm you want to leave Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday right now in the particular times?
The ordinance?
Never mind.
If we went with official holidays and weekends, that would solve the
Yeah, I mean,
conflict.
Sundays is fine with me too, because you don't have a lot of business. I mean, but I know it's a logistic issue.
Oh, yeah.
Good PD get force in, but again, the sheriff has told me directly and on Facebook that he is willing to.
I screenshotted where he
resources.
offered that on
So-
Facebook, so I can remind them.
The county manager, Mr. Steve, said that he would be in support of allocating resources as well, because it's a community event, so whether it's public works,
Right now, it's Tuesday, Thursdays, Saturdays, and legal holidays. And there's different hours depending on the day.
As a resolution, can we just leave that language and then if we decide we can,
Yes.
yes.
In the future, let's consider weekends and official holidays. Then that, we don't have to battle the thing about court during the weekdays. But I mean, we try it like it is, and that, you get hurt. I was a little more encouraged with our discussions with DOT than I was before when we were talking about different issues related to that. So I don't think any of these routes have the impact we were concerned about with DOT. So any of these will make that part of it better.
Is there any way we can do something that block the people that work for the train so they can feel the pain that we feel? That they can't get out.
The train is, the railroad is its own kingdom. And they have some federal courts set up to govern it, and everybody on the federal court's picked by the railroad. So if resistance is futile on that, so.
Say less.
we ready to move on? Thank you. Thank you.
We'll get it.
Yes, sir.
Moving to item 4, can discuss proposed roundabout option and other options for Solomon and Cersei. Public Works Director Chris Walker, welcome, sir.
Good morning. I've got some backup with me today too.
Good.
So you remember a couple of months ago, you guys asked us to relook at the intersection design of Solomon Street. We've done that now, and I've got Heath and Lineback representatives. Warren, you want to come up and talk to, answer any questions on it? You guys got the copies of this in your.
I seen it opened up put on the screen.
We came up with a roundabout design, but what we're running into is some issues with it impacting more property than the original design. So I'll let Warren go in depth on that.
I've got some handouts if you want to hold and look at it. Chris. For everybody. So, not sure how much of the background or history of how we've gotten to where we are y'all are aware of, so I'll just kind of do a quick history to catch us all up to current design. We picked out the project taken off preliminary design. A concept report had already been, concept layout had already been done by another firm and approved through GDOT. We picked it up, right as we picked it up to start off with the preliminary design. the city had a desire to change the roundabout at Jackson Lane and Solomon Street to a roundabout design. So that was our first thing we jumped on, was looking at updating the design there. So making that change some of the tie-ins on that end of the project, put us into a revised concept report. So we started working through that process, looking at the environmental impacts of this. One of the things that's come up is there's a historic district. It's the Griffin's Mill Historic District that the entire project is in. Because we're in this historic district, we run into this federal oversight. We've got federal funding on the project, so we get into section 4F. With that, we have to look at every parcel here, our impacts to those parcels, and our total impact within this district. So laying it out, we jumped in, we tightened it up. We have reduced the impacts from, if you look at sheet 1, that was the original layout. That was the approved concept. And jumping back to page 5 is kind of where we are now with the roundabout. We've reduced the total square foot of impacts, but a lot of those, looking at parcels 12, 10, 2, 3, 11. So that's kind of getting an idea through this curve up through here, leading up to the roundabout. A lot of that, we were able to tighten that curve up, pull that design in, have less square feet of impacts overall on the project, but that still does leave the parcels around the roundabout itself. So if you really drill in and start looking at not only overall impacts, but impacts to individual parcels, the roundabout still has a larger footprint and still has greater impacts to some of these parcels. So as it goes through this 4F review with FHWA, the first thing they're going to look at is there a alternate in this area that's going to have lesser impacts? Well, the project justification was an improvement to the railroad area, the intersection there, and the intersection over here is just where we're trying to get tied in. So that was not the justification for the project. We don't have, a traffic issue there to justify a roundabout. We don't have a safety concern there, and we're cleaning up the intersection. We'll have new marking, new signage, sidewalks. So the safety is going to be improved with a 4-way stop option. There's not a safety concern, so we don't have a good justification for keeping or going to a roundabout option and having these greater impacts within this district. So that becomes kind of the challenge with the roundabout option. And the feds, as we go through this, they're going to look at that. They're going to understand that there's not a justification for this roundabout. That's not the intent of the project. The intent was the railroad. So it's going to face a challenge by them as we move forward. They're going to want to see us reduce the impacts through here, which will be a 4-way stop option that will have the least impacts. It's going to have a smaller footprint just at the intersection. So it's kind of where we've come to. The 4-way stop is probably the most viable option, most likely to get through. We don't believe the roundabout is likely to get through the FHWA review process. We can move forward with that if that's what the city desires and try and get that through. But we do anticipate it'll be a time-consuming process, and there's no guarantee in the end that they would buy into it.
Can the roundabout be moved to the west back towards railroad tracks, 50 feet to?
We looked at moving it
You looked at that
around.
option, and I know there's a utility pole that's in the middle of all that as well.
Mhm. Yeah, we looked at moving it around some. We looked at maybe just coming straight across instead of curving back down and actually moving the intersection up. But then you get more impacts to parcel 9, which is that one home on the corner there, as well as just to those parcels across there. Some of those, if you look at page 5, we've got it colored in. You can see all the blue are contributing resources. So any increase to any of that blue area is just gonna be a negative to the project.
Going back to the four-way stop option, how much less cost was our original numbers versus the roundabout?
For design
Well,
or?
no, I mean, the total cost, I think it was an
we
additional
went from 5 to 7.
roundabout,
5 to 7 million, so it was, it's about 2 million different,
$2 million difference.
roughly.
So my question is, when you say that it's not likely to be approved, I certainly understand that, but what is, from a percentage perspective, are you saying like 100% sure, or just because so this is the area that I represent, so, and I live, I don't know, 6 houses down from, not the railroad track, but the intersection we're talking about, the roundabout, so I'm the one who brought up the concern about the actual traffic impact in the neighborhood, which I understand that that's an ancillary part to the project. My concern was once the traffic pattern is changed at the intersection, it'll have a trickle down effect, and then now the four-way stop / desired roundabout will become problematic. So, when you say, again, going back to what you said, the likelihood of it not being, is this like a, hey, I'm pretty sure it won't, or is it absolutely pointless for us to try to ask, or?
As we went through this evaluation, we not only met with our environmental team, we pulled GDOT and GDOT's Office of Environmental Services in. We've all had conversations on it. There is a traffic study that was completed, a ICE study through GDOT, which is a intersection control evaluation. The prevailing intersection control coming out of that was a four-way stop. So percentage of the roundabout being approved, 5 to 10%.
Yeah, let me help you,
Very low.
okay?
Y'all know I'm asking, I don't mind the answers.
Yeah,
Let me help you. I've been through this process, and they shut us down. I would venture to say you got about a 5% chance. I've got 2 intersections totally designed, $432,000 over on Experiment Street, and Chippo said, sorry for your luck. And this is even in a worst case scenario than what I had on Experiment Street when we did 237 and 238. So your opportunity here is just about nil. I've played the game with GDOT for over 30 years, and the remarks that I've been watching, Chris has been sending me the information and stuff, it ain't gonna go.
I think my concern, and again, this is probably coming from not being a part of this at the beginning, this has been going on for so many years, the situational traffic has changed in that area from what I could tell. There's a lot more truck traffic through there, because of the distribution just increasing drastically over the last year and a half. So I'm not sure that the justification for the railroad intersection is not now also just as bad for Jackson, Little, and Spalding and Solomon. So I don't know that the justification might not be sort of behind the times at this point because it's taken so long to get here. Does that make sense? I don't know when that justification was submitted and what they looked at. When was the traffic study and the ICE study done? Because I think things have changed. And you lived there.
Well, yeah, and so, I mean, obviously, there are some bounds to the data and all that. I guess, so my primary concern is we fix this intersection, which badly needs to be fixed, and so I won't challenge any aspect of that. But I don't know how much we consider the residential area that's to the east of the intersection and how the anticipated change in the traffic pattern affects those residential streets back there that now become cut-throughs and shortcuts to avoid. So I very much respect the experience and the data of, hey, this is very unlikely to happen. 5% is basically 0. So I totally respect that. But my concern remains the same in terms of it having, first of all, I didn't know I lived in a historic area, and it's time for me to move because it ain't nothing down there to save. That's the first problem. But the bigger part is it will have an impact on the residential area. And that remains my concern. So deferring to your expertise and knowledge, all of you, and being involved in this doesn't change the fact that I'm like, as soon as we change that intersection, now there's 20 or 30 more cars, which worth noting because this is a dialogue that we have up here often about how increasing cars in residential areas is not reason to make change in neighborhoods, right? That's a conversation we have like whenever there is annexation or development of homes. The first thing we want to go to hollering about is, oh, it's going to be so many more cars on the street. It's going to be so many more cars in the neighborhood. I am anticipating that this will create the same issue. And y'all always have a problem with that when it's somewhere else. So I don't know why we don't have a problem with that when we're saying we're going to divert the entire traffic pattern and now give people the option of riding down Milton and Grady and all that other stuff back there. That's all.
We always have the option of not taking the federal funding and funding it ourselves. I mean, that's an option we could do, but I don't know that we can afford to do that option right now, but that's an option.
So I mean, it's, and I feel kind of like just with the dialogue we had about the parade route, there's not a good answer because you guys are clearly presenting to us facts that say, hey, what you want isn't feasible. But on the other side of it, I think sometimes we forget that feasible for the government isn't always feasible for the people that live in the area. And so I don't know if it's a challenge to the justification of the project. Obviously, the intersection with the railroad track is a mess. You know, excuse the language, it's a hot ass mess. It just is what it is.
Dumpster fire.
Right, okay, it's problematic for a lot of different reasons. I just don't know that it does not create a different problem and apparently what is a historic area that is so important we can't change anything, but we can impact the people who live in said historic area with these changing traffic patterns. So I don't know what the answer is, and I'm not expecting you guys to wave a magic wand. This is just the thing that it makes my skin crawl because I don't feel like it's going to work out the way that I think it was anticipated. Like, hey, let's fix the intersection and life will be better on the east side of Griffin. And now I'm like, I don't really like this that much. But we don't have money to tell the feds, go away, we'll do our own thing. So those are the concerns. I have to defer to your expertise. I don't think we can afford to spend $8 million arguing with them ad nauseum to try to convince them. And certainly time is money, but it just does not settle well in my spirit that and anticipated beneficial change is probably going to have a negative impact.
Is there a way to deter the truck traffic by putting no through trucks and making sure they follow DOT rules in regards to
That doesn't even work downtown.
We can put no trucks.
I mean, it's a state highway.
But we can't, you can say no through trucks, but their destination is right here, so they're not through at that point. They're going where they're intended to go. That's the problem. So that would.
You also brought up the timeline between option 1 and option 5.
Yeah.
So if we went to option 5, it might be a lot longer.
Yeah, so they both have to go through the FHWA and the 4F process, and the project itself, regardless of the layout, has to go through that. So that timeline is there, but going through that, challenging them to approve a alternate that has greater impacts, and then possibly at the end, not getting that approved and having to go back and then redesign. It could be a 2-5-year process added to it.
So the cost will go up too.
Yes. And there's always, as Chris said, there's always the option, if we design it as a 4-way and we can do that with federal funds, get it built. If in the future it becomes an issue, as we design it, we can kind of line it up so that it'll work with a roundabout option.
That was my next question is, after the statute of limitation passes, come back and build it back.
And line it up so it can.
Line it up so that you could.
Not a lot of reconstruction, but it's designed for that future.
So whether it's 2 years, 5 years, what's.
Thoughts on that, Brett?
I'd have to go back and look again.
I don't think that's doable. If you spend federal highway money and they come back and they find that you've altered that, you got an issue. I gotta remember and go back to the regs, but I was gonna do that same thing. And a lady from FHWA said, if we find out, we want our money back.
We ain't got no payback money.
So altering that, I don't think is an option at a later point in time unless the city's prepared to refund the FHWA for the money they expended on that project.
Well, our justification might change by that
You
point.
have to have the justification.
Right, and then you change the project, you could go back and say, well, if you need to.
So if we're building, there's a problem.
Okay, so basically what y'all telling us is I need to get over this roundabout and just pray that it is not problematic. And if it is deemed to be problematic at some point in the future, somebody who is not me, because I'm not gonna be sitting here with y'all for 100 years, can come back up here and argue and try to get some more money to fix the problem that we created. That's what y'all told, recap.
You got another option, don't build it at all. You got another option, just don't build it.
Oh.
You're back there.
There's no way we can move it back or move it down to clear the same thing?
Yes.
No, it still increases the impacts to.
Have we looked at that or we just?
To moving the intersection? Yeah, so I've looked at moving it, to the northwest, lining it up more in there. You've got parcel 9 is a contributing parcel, so anything there would be an issue. We've discussed coming up.
That big white house on the
Oh,
corner, it's been vacant forever and ever.
They use it for a
chip.
storage house.
It's a potato chip.
But it is a deemed a contributing resource. So there's no way we can, we can't
I
change
know,
that. We've looked
all
at,
historical value.
but I think somebody brought up the idea of displacing the gas station, but then that brings up other issues.
Sure.
It was not.
Can I, not that it's my decision at all, but because I've been the one that's been primarily arguing, I don't want to not fix the intersection, but is there a possibility of having a little bit of time? Maybe I can just go poll the neighborhood to come back and see what issue they would rather have, the fixed intersection with the four-way stop or the still horrible intersection, but nothing changes.
I don't think waiting a week or two hurts us.
Like a month or two, or just to kind of actually touch bases, because I don't live at the intersection, but I live a couple houses down, but I feel I don't want to be wholeheartedly responsible for just my opinion when it's just as easy for me to go knock on the door and say, how do you feel?
Yeah, we'll work with that.
I can go like in the next 2 weeks or something, but just give me an opportunity to actually talk to the people who live there.
If the owner of that property is willing to demo that house.
No, you can't go that route.
Okay, I'm saying, I was just saying, I
Already
can
asked
go there and say, hey, it disappears and all of a sudden it's
We've
not.
already started the FHA review process.
They know, so, they're.
I'm just asking.
They look for that on projects for.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
hate to speak to this issue.
Yes, ma'am.
And so I would like to have.
Yes, ma'am. Please come forward if you don't mind, Mrs. Taylor. Again, name and address for the record.
Gwen Flowers Taylor, 134 Spalding Street. I've heard some stuff this morning that is very surprising to me because I've lived at 134 Spalding Street, which is right across the street from where this proposed crossway toward Solomon Street is going to be. And in the 20 years that I've lived in East Griffin at this address, no one has ever intimated or said that this was a historical district or that it was designated a historical district. And I've not seen proof that it's been designated an historical district. Every house in that circle is valued between $20,000 and $50,000. And that's one that's just about brand new. I do sit on my front porch and I can see all the traffic that comes from High Falls Road up Spalding Street to that intersection. And if the train comes, the traffic is backed up all the way back down Spalding Street to High Falls Road. If there is a four-way stop put there, that traffic that is going to be stopped by the train coming by is not only going to back up on Solomon Street, it's going to back up onto Spalding Street and on High Falls Road. I sit on my porch, and from the time a car leaves the railroad track until it reaches my house, which is about 4 houses in, the average speed is about 40 miles an hour. Traffic travels pretty fast over there, and there is not a single sidewalk, which concerns me because if this has been a historical district all this time, why hasn't anybody bothered to try to do anything to improve it? Certainly to put a sidewalk there.
Hey, don't be talking about the commissioner in that district.
Beg pardon?
Don't talk about the commissioner in that district.
I'm not talking about the commissioner, I'm talking about the board
Well,
in general.
We were not aware that it was
Right.
a historical district either. That's the federal government saying that.
Right.
We disagree. But
Well, I mean,
said-
I'm totally in agreement with that because the buildings that you're talking about displacing, which have never had a designation put on them, have not had anyone living in them. At least 3 of the buildings has not had anyone living in them in 20 years. The other building was condemned on the corner that apparently had been deemed historical piece of property too, is falling down. So I guess when I hear you guys saying, when I hear your representative saying there's very little chance of that, what I do hear is that there is no concern for the impact that it's going to have on that community. There's not going to be any concern for the impact that it's going to have on all the traffic that comes from 155 via Melrose Street and via Jackson Lane that comes through that intersection. And the roundabout is a way that the traffic can keep moving. If you were to come to that intersection and the train is there, you can circle and get out of it. Because I can assure you, there are going to be problems if there is no way for that traffic to move once the train comes. And you all know, like I do, that the port is full of tractor trailers that are being brought up and taken north on that same train route. And I can assure you that at least 10 times a day, that train comes across there. I hear it as soon as the whistle blows. So I would ask you to certainly get a better definition of who and what is saying that this is historic property, because I'm really not feeling that. I spoke with Brian Upson when I first heard that there was some sort of historical designation there, and he didn't seem to think that that should be an issue. And apparently now it has become a huge issue. So I would certainly hope that we would take the steps to find out who or what is saying that these properties are in fact historical. Because if that's the case, every house on Tinsley Street in Griffin, Georgia would be historical, because they've been there just about as long as many of these mill houses have been. So I ask you as a board to consider that community for the same reasons that Commissioner Flowers stated, the impact to the people that live there, which that is a very densely populated area, is going to be substantial if this intersection is not completed in a way that is not only beneficial to the railroad, but beneficial to the taxpayers and the residents that live in that area.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor.
Let me edify that a little bit. All right, the study's already been completed. SHPO has already completed what's historical or not. Let me give you an example. County project, Marybrook. There's a building sitting there. I live in that neighborhood. They couldn't realign that intersection and that building's falling down, but yet it was historical. Okay, so I have a little bit of knowledge about this. If you go to the other end of Rover-Satella Road where they put a traffic signal in, if y'all remember, there was a house sitting there on the corner across from the filling station was there. We couldn't touch that because it was historical, because the house that we had, the Flint River Pump Station, if I tried to tear down the old Flint River Pump Station, do you know what's sitting right next to the old Flint River Pump Station? The new one, the old one, because we couldn't tear it down because SHPO said you couldn't take it down. The reason we couldn't build a roundabout at the corner at 13th and Ray is because that blue house had significant historic asbestos shingles on it. Are you kidding me? Okay, give you another example, Shippo. So they don't, this is, I'm trying to edify what she was asking. At the intersection over here on 237 where Experiment Street is, we had to shift the friggin' road 22.5 feet to the west. And you know why? Because the headlights were going into a house that's been boarded up for like 30 years sitting there, and it was going through. So you're dealing with SHPO, okay? So that, this has already been approved, whatever options y'all want to use. But what I'm saying is Griffin has gone through this time and time again. Spalding goes through it. You don't, as long as there's federal money in, they approve the study, you don't have a leg to stand on as far as who declares it historical or non-historical.
Thank you. Ms. Flowers, you need some time to be able to make your
Yes.
constituents, so let's leave it at this point with you.
Yes, and I will report back either the next meeting or the meeting after that, so either 2 weeks or a month, and be able to feel more comfortable in saying what the neighborhood feels about the impact.
And let's just remember, I mean, the intersection still works. If it's four-way stop, we can still keep moving. It's just a stop between the movement. So, we wouldn't be shut down over there.
We're gonna have turn lanes off that. We do the four-way stop. So if there is a train, like Ms. Walker said, is it gonna be turn lanes so people can
It
circumvent?
won't be turn lanes, but I mean, the traffic that's coming through there could stop at the stop sign and go out Jackson.
The other
Now, if you're
option
sitting at the railroad tracks, you're stuck, but.
No, I'm not there at the four-way stop.
If you'll look at the things that they brought you, there are no turn lanes on them.
I didn't see.
But the other option is, the old road, the old Cersei Avenue Road, is to potentially develop that as an exit off of that stop sign.
I mean, you still got to exit if you're coming up High Falls and you turn on you can go Jackson Lane and hit 155 if the train's there.
But right now, you can't go north of North Cersei Avenue.
Yeah, but you're not gonna be able to go north or west at the intersection either
I'm talking
way.
about if you're coming to the four-way stop.
Coming from High Falls?
From High Falls at the road tracks. Right now, legally, you can't take North Cersei Avenue.
You can't.
What if we designed it where there was at least a way where you could turn north and hit Broadway there as an outlet?
I guess that's a possibility.
Same way here, you've got an option once you get to this.
We just gotta move it away from the tracks. That's gonna be the problem.
Right, I understand, but I'm just throwing, and here you got a way to exit once you hit the stop sign, going eastbound, once you hit the tracks, you're able to turn on South Cersei.
Right.
You continue on your journey versus being stuck. Here you get stuck, potentially.
I don't know if we've looked at
Is
that.
that
We can look at it.
Yeah.
And then if there's a way for us to turn that where
We can look at it.
folks could at least get out of the train
We can look at it.
chaos, is that
I appreciate y'all working with me. I know I know that there is not a good answer, so I appreciate you indulging.
No, and we can look at anything. We're willing to look at anything. We just want to be honest with you and where we're at with things. So.
I understand that, and so I just want to tell you guys I appreciate that. And the time to go and ask. I
so if we
understand.
get East Cersei as a way to get out of that
We'll look at it.
chaos. And then we can also, at the same time, sidewalks are going in on this project at the end of all of this, so we had additional sidewalks on
We
Spalding
had
Street.
sidewalks on it. Yes, we did.
All right, moving on.
Mayor, just real
Yes.
quick, to clarify, the 4F, section 4F, that this project falls under is very, very broad. It says that they can determine that this is a historic site if it is of national, state, or local significance, or if it's on or eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places. It's not on the National Register of Historic Places, so it is not a registered district, but that does not matter. So all it has to do is be associated with events that have made a significant contribution to the broad patterns of our history, be associated with the lives of persons significant in our past, embody the distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction, or have yielded or may be likely to yield important information in history or prehistory. Because of the mill right there, it meets a couple of things. That's all it has to do. It's very frustrating, but that's it.
Listed as a historic house. Thank you.
Right. I
Okay.
want one of those plaques.
We'll move on. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. Thank you for your patience with us. Moving into item 5, discuss potential projects for American Rescue Plan Act funds granted for the city of Griffin. Mr. Connor will address.
All right, we are getting there. We have spent the last several months going through the American Rescue Plan Act and trying to make some educated guesses at this point as to what the federal government is going to allow us to use this for. As you may remember, the Department of the Treasury put out an interim final rule in the spring that was supposed to be adopted and effective in its finality in August, and we still do not have that final rule. So we are basing our presentations and our proposals off of the interim final rule. They have come out and said that if we do spend any of our money and it does comport with the interim final rule, that they will not ask us to pay it back if something changes between interim and final. So we are comfortable at this point going forward with a couple projects that we would like to present to you today. Just to sort of refresh everybody's memory, the city was granted $8,519,203. As of right now, we have $4,259,601.50 that's already allocated and held by the city. The projects that we are currently proposing total $4,680,405.31, and we have an additional $569,731.26 that we have already spent on the purchase of Roseview. So that total is already at about $5.25 million if we do just decide to go forward with the projects that we're proposing today. We are not comfortable proposing any other projects at this point, except for one exception that was brought to us recently about community policing and some activities or incentives that we could provide our police force to possibly broaden the police force that we currently have. But this has been 5 or 6 months in the making, so I feel like we're not quite ready to present that yet, but we are still looking through that as we speak. Also, do not get this confused with other monies that are out there. There's still a lot of grants that we are applying for. And Mr. Cotton is looking at the state and local fiscal recovery funds for broadband specifically, and that application is due 31st, so he's been working on that diligently. Dr. Keller is looking through some water sewer infrastructure in addition to what we're proposing here. That he could use as well. And then also I think Mr. K has some parks and recreation type trails and maybe amphitheater that he and Mr. Walker are talking about and looking at those grants. So we're not just using our 8.5, we'd also like to either maybe use some of that remainder as leverage for matching or even just have additional funds from those other grants that are out there. I'll be honest, it's a little overwhelming because there's so much money floating around and so many different restrictions and available uses. So it's not an easy task to try and present to you what we think are the best uses for this, but we have come up with a couple, and I'm gonna let the director speak on that as they go. But to remind you, there are only 4 categories that we can use this for. It is to respond to the public health emergency or its negative economic impacts, to respond to workers performing essential work during the COVID-19 public health emergency by providing premium pay to eligible workers, for the provision of government services to the extent of the reduction in revenue due to the COVID-19 public health emergency relative to revenues collected in the most recent full fiscal year prior to the emergency, and to make necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. This final rule or interim final rule that they have given us is over 100 pages, almost 150. It sort of better defines what those 4 categories are, so they're hard to understand at first, but I think through the presentations that we're about to give, you'll see why we've chosen what we have, and we'll certainly answer any questions that you have as we go. I think Mr. Schwab is first.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning.
American Recovery Plan. So what I'm going to be speaking about today will be what's called Category C expenditures. That's the revenue sufficiency or revenue loss calculation. We've gone through some extensive research between University of Georgia, Carl Vinson Institute of Government. We've had discussions with our CPAs, our federal liaison, who's Hope Pendergrass with Mulvin and Jenkins. We've had discussions with Mr. Wes Clark over at who oversees the tax and expenditure database section under UGA. And basically, we're also relying on the additional guidance, the interim final rule, but the frequently asked questions that were issued July 19, 2021. So what we did was, we looked at the calculation, the requirement is a 4.1% growth rate. And that's the baseline, so it's either the greater of, or it's either 4.1 or greater, whichever one you calculate. If your growth rate is 4.3, as in the case over here, 4.28 or 6, then we go with the higher growth rate. What this does is goes back and measures a couple periods, fiscal years, and then it looks at a calendar year, and we include the entire city, and we back out all the utilities except for solid waste. And our growth rate calculation is that $391,000 is what we estimate at the moment. We did calculate the airport separately, and their projected growth rate is actually 3.12. So that automatically reverts to the 4.1, projecting 174,000. So in short, the aggregate of our 391 plus the airport's 174 would project the revenue, or the revenue loss, roughly about 566,000. And then, of course, there's the county share because of that relationship between the city and the county working with on the airport. 87,000 goes back to the county. That leaves us with a net estimated Corona state and local fiscal recovery funds available to pull from that $4.25 million of about $478,000. If, however, the final rule says we have to lump everything together, then that reduces it by a little bit, and the net then would be roughly, or excuse me, the total would be $557,000. The effect of that consolidation is around an $8,000 reduction overall, and that's split between the city and the county. Any questions? I know I went through this pretty quick, but
I'll just have to ask you separately, because I hadn't understood anything you just said.
no, that's fine. I'm here to answer questions. So if you do have something specific, I'll be happy to address it.
As a simplified
Thank you.
Yeah, because
explanation,
I don't understand.
they took the last 3 fiscal years before COVID hit and said, this is how much your revenues were growing. And so they are intimating that our revenues did not grow in 2020 because of COVID. And so what we lost was that amount. And so we can put that back in our general fund.
You think it's about how much was the total number? 550?
On that fourth slide, I think 566 less the portion that goes back to the county.
So 478.
At the moment would be roughly 479,000, correct?
And then it could be as high as 557?
No.
Okay, I got you.
So the third line, the total would be 566 is what we estimate today. But remember, that includes 174,000 that we're planning for the airport separately.
Not that we already spent, but that we anticipate.
We lost.
That we lost.
We lost revenue. Okay, so let me see if I can say it another way.
You didn't get the pay raise.
No. Let me.
It's trying to make us whole.
Right.
It's saying they think, based on this calculation that they have said we can use, we didn't come up with the calculation.
Okay.
That we think you lost $478,000 last year because of COVID. So we're giving that, you can use your ARPA money to replenish what you
Us
lost.
as the whole city
Yes.
lost 478.
Yes.
Now think about if you were Savannah and you didn't get any of that hotel motel tax, you lost a lot.
A
And so
lot.
they're allowing you to use ARPA funds to put that back into your general fund because of all that millions of dollars that you lost. Ours were not a tourist destination, so we weren't impacted as heavily by COVID. So it makes sense that it's not that much.
Okay. And then, so total as a city, we're saying that we lost 478. But of that 478, 174, or half of the 174 is the county portion.
No.
Of the 566, half is the county portion,
Right.
which leaves us with 478. If they make us put the airport into our citywide, then our actual net loss is less because we grew a little bit. So it's sort of backwards, but we lose a little less if we have to combine them all because we didn't take as big of a hit in our general fund and our other funds as the airport did. So separating the airport actually helps us.
Gotcha.
And the
Okay.
airport, and the money that comes reimbursement to the airport, does it come to our general fund? Or does it go to the airport authority operating fund?
Okay, so that 174, if we're allowed to claim the 174,000 as a revenue loss for the airport, that would be split at 87,000 city, county.
Gotcha.
The money we have the money already, the 4.25. So we would tap of that, forget about city side, for the city's portion of the whole thing, but just talk about the airport for the 174,000. 87 we could earmark for us, and then the other 87 we would have to draw from that and send it over to the.
But does it go in the
But my
airport
question
authority
is
or
it
the
money-
general fund?
It would go back to the county.
No, our 87.
Would our 87,000 go to keep internally, or does it get shifted to the airport authority?
Understood. It would be part of their operation.
So
Yes,
hopefully the county would have the same option to,
correct.
so the airport authority would end up with $174,000. Roughly.
In theory, if the county were to say, yes, keep it, they could reassign their rights to that.
I'm just asking a question on the airport authority side.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay. That's it.
Excellent work, sir.
Sorry.
Section 2.
Yes, the next one up will be premium pay, and that's with Ms. Stephanie Woods. That's category B.
Premium paid.
That's what it's called.
Good morning.
Good morning, happy day.
Happy day, happy day, happy Rocktober.
Is your office completely decorated for Halloween?
My office is off the charts.
And what day
You
is
must
that?
come and see it.
And Friday is when you're decorating yourself?
Oh, no, we're decorating. Yes, I will definitely be in costume
So-
Friday.
Want to encourage everybody to drop by the Human Resources Department and see an unbelievable extravaganza.
Thank you. I think you'll be very impressed this year.
Thank you.
And we'll see what I wear on Friday. It depends on how this presentation goes. Okay, in all seriousness, a part of the ARPA funds is employee premium pay. And the premium pay is for working in hazardous conditions through ARPA funding. The premium pay would be awarded to city employees who were deemed essential and performed work during the height of the initial COVID pandemic. The approximate funding is no more than $700,000. So let's kind of go back. On April 2nd, Governor Kemp released an executive order for shelter in place due to coronavirus. At that time, everyone was instructed to stay home except for essential employees. All employees of the city were deemed essential because we had to keep providing services and picking up the trash and keeping the water clean and et cetera. So we had a letter we were supposed to have with us at all times in our car for if we ever got pulled over, why are you out on the road? Because we were deemed essential to continue to take care of our citizens. All employees having this letter, it was every single employee, full-time, part-time, it did not matter what their position was, they were deemed essential. We decided the time period to look at this calculation would be April 3rd, which is the date, the next day from the shelter in place through April 30th of 2021. So we're basically looking at a 13-month time frame. Our initial thought was that was the height, and things really started going back down in April 30th before the Delta variant came out. So that's really kind of changed things. But for our determination, we used the period of April 3rd, 2020 to April 30th of 2021. So that's very important. Our criteria on who would get this bonus pay is very specific. And this would be any employee that worked any hours during the calculation time period. So this is anyone who worked during those 13 months. For this calculation, we are only including regular and overtime hours worked because those were the hours of potential exposure to COVID or other hazardous materials in the waste, et cetera. So those are the hours we're looking at. That means we've excluded holiday time, vacation time, bereavement, sick, anytime anyone was out with COVID and administrative leave. The other reason we're using this time period and the hours of regular and overtime work is because that also encompasses any employee that was hired during that time frame and any hours from which he or she worked. No one is left out. If you worked during that time period, be it 10 hours, be it 2,000 hours,
you would be recognized. You would receive the premium pay. We did use the employee's hourly rate of pay on the date of June 30th for this calculation. The employee must be actively employed on the date of payment, assuming we make the payment, to receive this. So if someone has already terminated who was here, who had hours during that time frame, and they no longer work here, then obviously they are not eligible for it. Our payment would be processed through regular payroll processing via separate payroll on November 19th. We chose that date. It's not an official pay date. We want to make sure if this is awarded that our employees see it as a separate event and that we can define it as this is part of the ARPA money that was premium pay, and here's what that is for you. The amount varies by the employee's hourly rate of pay. The premium pay, consistent with ARPA regulations, it's higher for lower rates of hourly pay, and it decreases as the hourly rate of pay increases. And this is the one criteria that they're very specific in the ARPA regulations. And so for our purposes, if you look on this slide, you will see in the first chart, we have the hourly rate of pay. The first range is from $10 to $14.81. And during this time period, our lowest paid employee was $11.15. And these were some of your workers riding on the back of the refuse truck, picking up the trash. So they may have kids at home they're juggling because all of a sudden they're out of school. They may have a spouse who's not working because the business closed or whatever, but they're still having to get up and come into work. And that's the point of the premium pay. So for those at the $10 to $14.81 as an hourly rate of pay, we are looking at premium pay of $1 per each hour of regular time or overtime worked. Okay, so they're going to get the most through this proportionate pay. We have a total hours worked in this range of 138,000 hours were worked for these employees. And if you look at the bottom chart, the results of the calculation, there were 89 employees that were in this range that are still employed as of today, because things can change, but as of today, this was 89 employees. So these 89 employees would receive a total of $165,422.
Each?
Total, my apologies, no. That is the total amount for the 89 employees. And so one employee, theirs may be $100, one may be $600. It's going to vary based on the hours that he or she worked. If you go to the next section, and this is where the bulk of our employees are, making $14.82 an hour up to $21.72 an hour, they're receiving a little bit less because again, it has to be structured. But we do still have them at 90 cents per hour for each hour worked. So this equates to a total of 178 employees for a total amount of $348,230 that this group would receive. As you go to the next group, $21.73 to $30.02 per hour, it's 70 cents. The next group, $30.03 to $40, it goes down to 40 cents. And then the highest group we have over $40 and a penny is 20 cents. And so you see the corresponding calculation at the bottom showing you how many employees you have for each range and then what the total would be of the premium pay for that group. So we're certainly meeting the criteria starting at $1 an hour and going all the way to 20 cents. So we've talked a lot about the different amounts and we believe that's fair and that it appropriately recognizes those who, again, mostly were working and receiving the smallest amount of pay for the work that they were doing.
Go ahead. I was just gonna say, so let's just say your range, the $10 to $14, does it end up being like a 0.25 or what percent raise would that be?
It depends.
Oh,
We
okay,
can't,
per
because it
person.
depends on how many hours that employee worked.
I got it.
From that period of April, the 13 months, total number of hours times that.
Correct.
And they get this over the next 13 months? Or
No, they get it in one lump sum on November 19th.
Oh, wow.
It's one payment.
So someone that's got
Awesome.
40 times 52, normal annual is 2,000 hours, is that right?
Correct.
So 2,000, they would get times $1.
Correct.
Number of hours times $1, so
Correct.
$2,000.
That would be 2,000 in that situation.
Minus deduct, they get FICA and taxes, all that.
Right, it would be taxed, yes.
How do we come up with the factor per hour? Is that a guideline that's set for us? Or?
It is not a guideline that's set for us, it's just, it's what we came up with, so.
Okay, I have another question also. People who were working for the city during that time period, if I understood you correctly, they're no longer employed by the city, they're no longer eligible.
That's correct.
Do we expect any litigation? I mean, I would, if I was in that position, I'm like, wait a minute, I work as an essential employee, provide services to this community. And just because I'm no longer here, I still was at risk in that time period, so I expect to be compensated.
Well, this could be that we do none of this, so we could have zero, we don't offer this program. It's voluntary for the city to decide, for you all to decide how to spend this money. You wanted to say we're not including part-time, or we're not including a range above a certain amount, you can do whatever you want, as long as it meets the guidelines of ARPA. So our choice was just administratively and to reward those that are still here, this is the best way to handle that. That's our recommendation.
How many people,
Litigation, no, they have no right to stay.
do we know how many people worked in that time period that's no longer employed?
Actually, we do.
25%.
We have 106 that are no longer with us. And then we have 31 that were fairly recently new hires. So about a total of 329.
From that one pay range? Oh, honey,
Miss-
y'all let me.
Well, it's a
Ms. Flowers,
13-month period.
Let's let Ms. Flowers, please.
Okay, 2 questions. First, does this get paid as a bonus as opposed to like hourly pay? Because the taxes on a bonus check is trash. They take like 40% of your money as opposed to regular, so it's gonna be a bonus check.
It would be calculated that way, yes.
Okay, so they're gonna get half of the money back
Right.
anyways. Okay, the other question I had is as it pertains to someone who has submitted a resignation that says that they're disqualified. I don't feel like that's fair personally. I feel like if you put in a 2-week notice, you can still technically get fired before you resign, so technically you're still an employee. You have to abide by the rules. So even if you have a resignation here, you should get the money because you still work here. That's just my personal.
Okay.
Any other thoughts? And when are we voting on this current proposal?
We would need a consensus from you all now. What we did last time for CARES Act is we drafted a resolution that mainly adopted budget amendments to move all of this around. So we would just do the same thing and put it on the November 9th agenda.
Okay.
So we would, I think, if I understand from Mr. Schwab, thank you. That we would do it the same way this time and just include those in the budget amendments for each of these projects, and we can move it that way. It is rather lengthy.
Okay.
So I appreciate all this, everything you've done, but if I was employed during that time period I brought up, I would seek my fair share. And so I'd like to know how much, if they were to go to court and be successful.
They would not be successful in court.
They would not.
No, it's a voluntary program. We don't have to do any of it. So just because we decided which ones we were going to do and which ones we weren't going to do, that's not the court's prerogative. That's ours as this governing body. ARPA hasn't said you have to pay everybody that worked for you. ARPA said you can pay whomever you want, but you need to do it based on lowest rate to highest rate. And the ones that get the most premium pay are the lowest paid employees. We would certainly.
Well, I concur with that.
But there is no legal standing for.
Counselor, if you concur.
It is it cold?
Yes, honey.
Like freaking
The one back there,
Y'all trying to
the
kill
fire
us.
department has got the heat on back there.
It's gotta be 63, 64 degrees.
All right, you saying we got no.
So if we have no legal liability, is the consensus of the board to take the recommendation of staff?
I want, I mean, you have my consensus, but we didn't hear the rest of the stuff.
Yeah, we've got 2 more.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is just on this piece.
Oh, I didn't know we could do it individually.
You can tell us if you don't want a particular project, if you don't want Mr. Schwab to have revenue recovery. I didn't really hear a consensus there. I'm assuming that's sort of a
We need
no-brainer.
money.
Because it goes back into general fund and you can use it for whatever at that point.
Anything to help our employees.
Okay, well, are y'all okay with them including people who have put in a resignation? Not people that are fired, but people who are, or that don't work here, but the 2-week window, because it says that they're disqualified, but I feel like they're still an employee at that point, so.
You saying before
Well-
November?
Right, well, here's the thing, if we pay it out on November the 19th, we still have a couple of weeks that someone could resign today and they're gone within 2 weeks before we even
Absolutely.
pay it out.
Right,
But if they're during their notice period,
right.
you're paid out on November 19th and their last day is November 25th, is what you're saying they should be included.
Right,
So
as long as.
I bet we won't have anyone turn in a resignation for a while,
See,
until the
look at that.
19th.
Yeah, I don't want any active employee to be excluded, even if if they're leaving on the 20th. If they work on the 19th, I want them to be paid.
Okay.
Take care of everybody? Everybody's leaving on the 22nd of the month, they're out of here,
We ain't
Thanksgiving.
coming back after Thanksgiving.
Hey, Ronnie was still a city commissioner, if we were part-time. Oh, I'm just kidding. Just kidding, moving on.
Thank you.
Item 3, who is our honoree on this one?
Dr. Keller.
All right, Dr. Keller. We agree. So you're gonna be able to say, are we gonna be able to add sewer capacity to Shoal Creek?
Huh.
Sure.
No.
What we have here, this is for Potato Creek.
Okay.
And you can see there's 3 steps, the planning process of putting the team together, getting your subject matter experts. The second phase will be the the data collection through surveying of the insides of the pipes with sonar and and track crawlers, and then we'll do the flow monitoring, and at the end of that project, we'll do the engineering and putting the bid documents together. That's your basic cost. For this particular project is a little bit over $500,000, and that's what it's going to assess. It's going to go from Grantland all the way down to the plant. And then there's some fingers right there that you can see. That's the major outfall conveyance line for the city of Griffin to Potato Creek. The other outfall conveyance line is a force main coming from Rehoboth Road, going on the other side to Potato Creek. So short and sweet, no words.
And this will evaluate the situation that Mr. Sullins brought to us on planning.
That'd be correct, sir.
Okay.
Oh.
All right.
Good job.
All right, short and sweet. Thank
That's
you all.
all? You speak 504,000?
They said
Right
3
now.
slides, I've got 3 slides. You want me to talk some more?
What's it, brother? Be brief.
Yes, be brief.
Okay.
5 feet.
Mr. Conton, looks like you're the next.
I think I'm the last. How's everybody today?
How much we trying to spend? $4 million?
Yeah.
Close to
Well,
it.
we have 8.5, so at some point, all of that, otherwise we gotta send it back.
That's
It's gonna turn on Monday.
Okay, let's roll, sir.
All right, so broadband funding, we're requesting $3 million in ARPA funds to deploy a fiber optic network to unserved and underserved in West Central Griffin. And I'll show you guys maps on that here in a second. We're also seeking an additional $1.1 million in state grant funding to offset this, to deploy fiber optic in downtown areas, historic downtown. These projects are kind of tied together to some degree, particularly from an engineering standpoint, but it will also require $561,000 in matching funds for that grant.
How much is that? Again, right, you went real quick.
Oh.
562.
So wait, 3 million, and then the second number just the matching, so not the 1.1.
Correct. And we have not
561.
calculated for the 560 because we don't know if we're gonna get that grant. So that's why we're also reserving almost $3.5 million in what we currently know we will get from ARPA, because we might have some matching depending on who is awarded grants.
Okay.
And the projects from an engineering standpoint are kind of tied together, so there will be some cross allocation there. Here are the 2 project areas. In red over here, this is downtown, we have, this is the state grant, the 1.1 million. And then the yellow area over here from Poplar Street north to Experiment Street, this is the area that we're proposing with the ARPA funds.
In regards to this amount of money, up to $4 million that we would spend, what is your projections in terms of revenue as you build out the system? Oh, I'm sorry.
Next slide.
We'll get there. So we based our decision on the National Telecommunications and Information Administration's broadband map on broadband need. Can you pull up that website? For both ARPA and the state grant, there are requirements that you have to target folks that don't have internet. You know, that's kind of a no-brainer. In downtown, this data is Form 477 from the FCC. And what that data is that is data that comes from the telecommunications providers that say, we don't have adequate internet, or what the FCC qualifies as broadband in this red region right here. So the state grant is going to target this area right here. We feel that it's our best chance at getting those state ARPA monies. Can you pull up the other map? And kind of scroll it to the top right. So down a little bit. There you go. So all of this red region, these are survey data from the American Census Survey, in which households report, 25% of households report that either they do not have internet or they don't have a device to get on the internet with. So our second area is going to target this region through here, because it qualifies for both of those community surveys. So we feel like that definitely meets the spirit of the ARPA funds. Can you pull does anybody have any questions on that?
Y'all always got a question. It was just a brief one I promise.
Okay.
The part that, I guess it looks darker red.
Yeah, scroll down a little bit, Amanda. Okay, and then over on the left-hand side, uncheck one of those two boxes over on the left right there. So there's actually two data points. One is the survey that says you don't have a device, and the other data point is you don't have internet.
Okay.
So each one of those is an indicator of broadband need in that particular region.
Gotcha. Okay, so the one that was just unchecked is the no access.
No internet access, and then uncheck that one. And then the area that's still highlighted is they don't have, or the individual does not have a device. So,
That's crazy.
yeah, 25% report no device, and this is at the census tract level.
Okay.
So the West Griffin section versus the North Hill section, they're basically both 25%?
Mhm.
So why did you pick West Griffin versus North?
Because it doubles up on both of those two indicators.
Okay, I see.
All right. Then on the final slide, our business case. We have a couple unknowns for this area. We've never done residential market before, so we are estimating extremely low take rates, just to err on the side of caution. Also, electric line construction, make-ready work, that's not calculated into our projections because we won't know what the costs are until we get engineering completed. Total cost for engineering, construction, and electronics is just shy of $3 million, with engineering and staking being $91,000 of that. The target area has 1,720 potential customers, 588 of which are businesses. And we've seen quite a bit of success in the business arena, so we're estimating our take rate on that to be 30%. Except for some of the costs may be shared with the state grant funding that we're seeking. So that region that we showed you, it may expand or contract depending on how much money we do or don't get from the state. Our estimated revenue after 24 months at a 30% take rate for business is $45,000. Residential at a 10% take rate is $17,000, which comes to $750,000 annually in revenue.
Question per household, I know this is gonna just vary on, but what is like a base service or what's like a base rate? Or, you know?
It depends on the provider that you go with, but we're seeing folks most operators standardizing on about $70 a month for their top tier plan.
So based on 1132 residents at 10%, it's 113 residents. To make $17,000, that means the average residents we pay $170?
No, I think our ARPU for both was $109. So when we figured out what our average rate of return per location passed, we combined business and residential, and we came out to $109 average rate of return for residential and commercial combined.
Do we foresee in the future that, I mean, I know it's law of supply and demand, but kind of a need for these areas, but also maybe becoming more affordable for a lot of these households or not?
I hope so. I think we need to strive to make the internet as affordable as possible, particularly in these areas.
I mean, I know we can't control that, we're just providing the hookup, right?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, we'll have to be competitive with some of the other carriers out there, but, you know, we do need to strive to get the cost down as low as possible.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So that's about $4 million total, $3 million on ARPA.
Yeah.
One from state.
Well,
50-50.
It'll be a 50-50 match on the state, so that would actually be $560,000, I believe. Yeah.
Anything else, Mrs. O'Connor?
No, we do have another,
I know we got executive.
executive session.
Executive session coming. Okay. Anything else before we go into executive session? Staff and team, thank you all for what you've done today. Appreciate y'all's hard work. Final item is consider executive session pursuant to CGA section 5014-21 for the purpose of consulting and meeting with legal counsel pertaining to pending and potential litigation, settlement claims, administrative proceedings, or other jurisdictional actions brought on to by or against the agency or any officer or employee or in which agency any officer or employee may be directly involved with the CGA section 5014-3 for the purpose of authorizing negotiations for just dispute for leased property. All in favor of the first motion, second?
Motion second.
Motion was trimmed and second was brought. Like ice beef.
I don't even drink coffee, I'm gonna go stop. There's not.
I'm just like,
I'm gonna go there, I'm gonna counter with my food. How are you? You're sure.